welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today by putting you in a specific headspace. I want you to imagine you're sitting in a conference room.
Okay.
It's one of those windowless rooms. Maybe the air conditioning is humming a little too loudly and the coffee is stale. You're in a meeting about the future of your company's technology.
We have all been in that room.
Exactly. And there's an argument happening. It's getting a little heated.
Mm-hmm.
On one side of the table, you have let's call them the new guard. They're saying, we need to adopt this agile method. We need to do DevOps. We need to deploy 10 times a day because that's the modern way.
And on the other side, you've got the old guard.
Right. And they are saying, absolutely not. That is reckless.
You can't do that.
We handle sensitive customer data. We need to stick to the traditional checklist. We need approval committees because that is safer. And they just go back and forth.
Opinion versus opinion.
I feel like this works. Well, I feel like that is dangerous.
It's the classic battle of the loudest voice in the room, or as we sometimes call it in the industry, the HIPPO method, the highest paid person's opinion.
But then, imagine if someone didn't just shout louder. Imagine if someone reached into their bag, pulled out a massive binder, dropped it on the table with a heavy thud, and said, actually, we don't need to guess.
I have the data.
I have the data right here, and the data says you're both wrong.
That is the moment the room goes silent.
That is the moment we are living in today, because we aren't just talking about opinions anymore.
No.
We are talking about the State of DevOps Report.
Yeah.
We are talking about the rigorous science that really killed the alchemy of software development.
It really was a turning point. I mean, it moved the entire conversation from philosophy to physics.
But, and this is a huge but, and it's the reason we are here today, how do we know that binder full of data isn't full of garbage?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
We see charts all the time. Productivity up 50%, 90% of CEOs agree.
Right.
Most of that is just marketing fluff. It's designed to sell you consulting services. So today, we are doing something different.
We're being skeptical.
We are taking the skeptical path. We are going to audit the machine.
We're going to look under the hood.
We are unpacking Chapter 15, the data for the project. Now, I know Chapter 15 sounds like the part of the book you skip to get to the index.
It sounds dry. Really dry.
But this text is actually a crime scene investigation. It is the rigorous backstory behind a massive 4-year research project that ran from 2014 to 2017.
And this wasn't just some small poll. This was a global investigation into how to make technology great, and more importantly, how great technology actually makes organizations and businesses better.
So our mission today is simple. We are going to pull back the curtain on how this data was collected. It's not just about the final numbers.
No.
It's about the design choices, the trade-offs, and how the researchers made sure they weren't just, confirming their own biases.
And I'm ready to explain why things like snowball sampling and cross-sectional analysis are actually the coolest parts of this whole story.
Let's get into it. The text kicks off by setting the scene. It's 2014. The researchers have a goal. They want to investigate agile and lean processes. They want to measure the invisible stuff trust, information flow, how teams work together. But right out of the gate, they made a really controversial decision about who they were going to invite to the party.
They did, and this one decision fundamentally shaped all the data that we see today. They decided to target professionals who were already familiar with a specific buzzword.
DevOps.
Exactly. DevOps.
Yeah, let's pause here for a second, because if I'm a critic, I'm looking at this and saying, wait a minute. If you only survey people who know the secret handshake, aren't you rigging the results?
Yeah.
Aren't you just creating a club for the cool kids?
It's a very valid critique on the surface, but to understand why they did this, you really have to go back to the context of 2014. DevOps wasn't just a job title back then.
Yeah.
It was a banner. It was sort of the term that was encompassing all these high-performance behaviors they wanted to study.
So it was a filter.
It was a necessary filter. They had two primary reasons for limiting the pool this way. The first one was about the industry itself. They needed people who were actually doing the work of software delivery.
Right. They didn't want hobbyists. They didn't want people just speculating from the sidelines.
And here is the crucial distinction, something that people often miss. They didn't care about the parent organization.
What do you mean by that?
They weren't just looking for people at tech companies, the Googles or the Netflixes of the world.
Because if you only study Google, You only learn how Google works.
Exactly. You learn nothing about the rest of the world. They wanted to know how software works in the real world. So they needed to find the software developers hiding inside banks,
Inside retail giants.
inside hospitals, in some government agencies, everywhere.
I think that's such an important point. If you are a developer building the mobile app for a massive bank, you are in the software business. The bank thinks it's in the money business. But you, your team, you're in the software business.
Precisely. And by targeting the DevOps crowd, they were using that term as a kind of bat signal.
Chuckles. A bat signal.
It was a way to shine a light across all these different verticals, healthcare, finance, manufacturing, and say, hey, if you are the person worrying about deployment pipelines and automated testing, we want to talk to you.
But the second reason they use this filter is the one I found really fascinating. It wasn't just about finding the right people. It was about respecting their time.
Yes.
The text talks about something they call the 15-minute rule.
This is a golden rule of survey design.
Yeah.
It's all about cognitive load.
Break that down for us. What's cognitive load?
Okay, imagine I hand you a survey. You're busy. You have emails to answer, code to write. I have maybe 15 minutes of your attention before you get annoyed and just close the tab.
Or just start clicking random buttons to get it over with, which I've definitely done.
Right, which completely ruins the data. Now, suppose I want to ask you about continuous integration. If I have to include a 3-paragraph essay explaining what continuous integration is just so you can answer the question, well, I've already lost.
Because if you have to explain it to me, I probably don't do it.
Exactly. And even if you do read the definition, you're now answering based on a theoretical understanding you gained 10 seconds ago, not based on deep lived experience. The researchers realized that if a participant has to spend 15 minutes just reading definitions, the data quality drops to 0.
That makes total sense. It's like, okay, imagine I'm doing a survey on advanced French cooking. If I have to explain to you what a sous vide is and write a whole paragraph about water baths and temperature control,
then you shouldn't be in my survey about sous vide cooking.
Right. I'm not the target audience. My data is worthless.
So by filtering for people who recognize the term DevOps, or were at least curious enough to open an email with that in the subject line, they ensured a baseline of competence. They ensured they were talking to people who already spoke the language.
But, and there's always a trade-off in science, isn't there? This choice had a consequence. And the text is surprisingly honest about this.
Yeah.
They admit that by setting this bar, they created a blind spot.
They did. They explicitly acknowledged that they are missing the unaware group.
The people who look at the subject line DevOps survey and say, what is that? And just hit delete.
Or the people who are working in environments that are so siloed, so traditional, that modern terminology hasn't even breached the walls yet. You know, they're still talking about waterfall and big upfront design.
The text refers to this group as the lowest of the low performers, which, I mean, it sounds harsh, but mechanically it's true.
It is. If you think about the performance curve of the entire industry, the researchers are really only looking at maybe the top 70 or 80%. They just chopped off the bottom tail of the distribution.
So let's think about the implications of that for a second. When we read this report and we see these massive gaps, like high performers are deploying 46 times more frequently than low performers,
Right.
we are comparing the high performers to the aware low performers, not the truly low performers.
Correct. You're comparing them to the group that at least knows what continuous integration is, even if they're bad at it.
So the true zero performers,
Yeah.
the ones who are still deploying manually once a year from a shared drive, who've never even heard of automation, they aren't even on the chart.
They are off the map entirely, which means the comparisons in the study are actually conservative.
Conservative. How so?
Yes. The gap between the best teams and the true worst teams is likely an abyss. It's probably much, much wider than the data shows because the worst teams weren't even invited to the table.
That is a terrifying thought. It suggests that while the top of the industry is moving forward at light speed, the tail end is dragging much further behind than we even realize.
It's the dark matter of the software universe. We know it's there, we can feel its gravitational pull, but we can't measure it because it doesn't emit any signals we can pick up with this methodology.
But despite that, they argue this trade-off was worth it.
It was, because while they lost the total picture, they gained what they call explanatory power for the group that actually matters, the people who are trying to play the game.
The ones trying to get better.
Exactly. They wanted to know how to move from good to great, or from bad to good. Knowing in detail how the oblivious operate doesn't actually help solve the problem of high performance. It's a different problem altogether.
Okay, so we have established the who. We know they targeted the practitioners who were at least in the game. Now we need to talk about the what. How do you ask these people questions without getting lied to?
Yes. The halo effect.
This is just basic human nature, right? If you walk up to a manager and ask, are you a good leader? What on earth are they going to say?
They are going to say, absolutely, I'm a fantastic leader. Even if their team hates them and is actively looking for new jobs, we all want to present ourselves in the best possible light. And in the tech world, this gets compounded by buzzwords.
Right. If agile is the trendy thing, and I ask you, is your team agile? Andrew, you are going to say yes because you don't want to look like a dinosaur.
Even if your version of agile is just doing the same old waterfall process, but you stand up for 15 minutes every morning to talk about it.
Chuckles. The dreaded stand-up.
This creates what we call response bias. If the researchers had just asked, do you do continuous integration or do you do DevOps? The results would have been worthless, utterly worthless. Everyone would have just said yes.
So how did they outsmart the human ego? How do you get to the truth?
You stop asking about identity and you start asking about behavior.
Give us an example of that. What's the difference?
Okay, so instead of asking, do you use continuous integration, which is a label, an identity.
Something I can put on my resume.
Exactly. They ask specific mechanical questions, things like, are automated tests kicked off when code is checked in?
Oh, I see. That's totally different.
It's binary. It's factual. Either the computer runs the tests automatically or it doesn't. You can't spin that. You can't feel like the tests are running. They either happen or they don't. There's no room for ego.
It strips away all the marketing fluff and the buzzword.
Exactly. They did this for everything instead of, do you have a good culture? Which is meaningless.
I mean, what does that even mean?
Right. They asked about information flow. If something goes wrong, is the messenger shot? Or is the inquiry welcomed? These are observable behaviors you can actually report on.
And what I love about this, and the expert note in the text points this out, is that it democratizes the findings.
What do you mean by that, democratizes?
Well, it makes the findings universally applicable. It doesn't matter if your team calls itself Agile or Scrum or Kanban, or even if you call yourself the Code Ninjas from Planet X.
Right. The underlying mechanism is what matters. If you check in code and tests run automatically and you get fast feedback, that predicts high performance. It doesn't matter what methodology you claim to follow. The label is irrelevant.
And it doesn't matter what industry you were in either.
That's the key insight. The study found that these behaviors predict performance in banking, in retail, in healthcare, in government. The physics of software delivery don't change just because you are moving money instead of moving pixels.
I think that is such a powerful takeaway for you listening. We so often hear people say, oh, well, that DevOps stuff works for Spotify, but we are a highly regulated insurance company. We are special.
And the data says, loud and clear, you are not special.
Laughs. I love that.
It's true. A culture of transparency and trust predicts performance everywhere. If you punish people for mistakes in a bank, you get the same bad results as if you punish people for mistakes in a startup. The mechanics are absolutely universal.
So we know who they asked, the aware, and we know what they asked. Behavior's not buzzwords. Now we get to the part that feels like a detective story. How do you actually find these people?
This is a huge, huge logistical challenge.
Right. If I want to study dentists, I can go to the American Dental Association. I can, buy a list of every licensed dentist in the country.
Correct. Or if you want to study civil engineers, you look for PEs, professional engineers. There is a registry for that.
But there is no national registry of DevOps engineers. It doesn't exist.
No. And think about the job titles in our industry. Yeah. They're absolute chaos.
Oh, I have seen some wild ones. Digital prophet, code wizard,
member of technical staff,
systems administrator, site reliability engineer, full stack developer. I mean, the list goes on and on. If you tried to scrape LinkedIn for a specific job title, you would miss half the population. Easily.
So you can't use a phone book. You can't use job titles. So how did they get thousands and thousands of people to answer this survey?
They used a specific method called non-probability sampling. Specifically, they used referral, or the much cooler name, snowball sampling.
I love this visual, the snowball.
It's exactly what it sounds like. Imagine rolling a small snowball down a big snowy hill.
You start with a small ball. That's your initial list of contacts. You push it. Those people take the survey, and then, this is the key part, they forward it to their peers.
So I get the email, I answer the questions, and then I send it to my team. And maybe they send it to their friends at other companies.
And the sample grows exponentially as it rolls. It just picks up more and more people that the researchers never would have found on their own. It gets bigger and bigger.
But why was this necessary? I mean, aside from the job title chaos, the text mentions a really important psychological reason: trust and fear.
This is the dark side of corporate life. Think about the history of efficiency studies.
The Bobs from the movie Office Space. What would you say you do here?
Exactly that. For decades, when a consultant showed up with a clipboard to measure productivity, it usually meant one thing and one thing only: layoffs.
Lean transformation is so often just a fancy corporate word for workforce reduction.
Precisely. Technical workers are, for good reason, historically very suspicious of being studied. They assume the data will be weaponized against them. Oh, you only write 50 lines of code a day, you're fired.
So if I get a random email from some generic research firm I've never heard of asking me about my failure rates and my recovery times,
You delete it immediately. You assume it's a trap, or it's corporate propaganda to sell you something.
but if you send it to me, my friend, my colleague, and you say, hey, check this out. This is legit. This isn't for HR. This is for us, for the community.
Then you participate. The referral from a trusted source validates the safety of the survey. Snowball sampling relies on the social network, the trust graph of the industry, to bypass the corporate immune system.
That is such a fascinating insight. It's basically using the underground network of engineers to get at the truth that management can't see.
It is.
There's always a but.
Snowball sampling has a massive, well-known flaw. We call it homophily.
Birds of a feather flock together.
Exactly. If I only email my friends and they only email their friends, who are probably a lot like them, I'm just going to get a map of my own social circle. The data will just reflect my own bubble.
So if you start the snowball with a bunch of startup guys in hoodies in San Francisco,
You are going to end up with a survey of startup guys in hoodies in San Francisco. That's it. You won't reach the mainframe developer in Ohio. You won't reach the sysadmin in Tokyo. You create an echo chamber.
so how do they fix that? How do you make sure the snowball isn't just one color?
It's all about the seed list. You can't start with just one snowball from one place. You have to start an avalanche from multiple peaks at the same time.
The text lists where they started, they didn't just use one mailing list, did they?
No, not at all. They went to industry heavyweights, people like Gene Kim, Jez Humble. These are authors who have huge, diverse global followings. That gets you the true believers, the people at the forefront.
But they also used marketing databases. They mentioned Puppet specifically.
Right, and that's a different crowd. Puppet sells configuration management software. They sell to banks, to universities, to governments, to old-school retailers. That gets you the practitioners who might not be on Twitter reading thought leadership, but are in the trenches using the tools every single day.
And they were intentional about diversity, right? The text mentions that.
Very. They knew that tech has a diversity problem. They were very aware of it. If they just let the snowball roll naturally, it would skew heavily white and male. So the text says they explicitly targeted underrepresented groups and minorities in technology.
So they reached out to specific mailing lists and professional groups for those communities.
Exactly. They seeded the snowball in those communities on purpose to ensure the data wasn't just reflecting the majority demographic. By casting the net incredibly wide at the very start, they were able to mitigate that echo chamber effect.
It's really a lesson in intentionality. You can't just hope for good data. You have to design the process to create it.
Absolutely. Good data doesn't happen by accident.
So we have the people, we have the behavioral questions, we have the snowball method. But here's the fear that every researcher has at 3:00 a.m.
Chuckles. The cold sweat moment.
What if I'm missing something huge? What if I have a massive blind spot and I don't even know it?
The unknown unknowns.
Exactly. How do they fact-check their own findings? How do they guard against that?
They used a strategy called triangulation.
Which sounds like something from a submarine movie. Get me a triangulation on that signal.
Yeah, laughs. It works on the same basic principle. If you are lost in the woods and you can see one landmark, you have a vague idea of where you are.
Okay.
If you can see two landmarks, you're much better off. If you can see three, you can pinpoint your exact location on a map.
You need multiple points of reference to find the truth.
Correct. They didn't just rely on the survey numbers. That was just point 1 on the triangle.
So what were the other points?
Point 2 was community engagement. This is so crucial. They didn't just publish the report and then vanished into an ivory tower. They went to conferences. They went to meetups. They spoke to people.
In person?
In person. They showed the data to roomfuls of engineers and managers and said, does this match your reality? Does this feel right to you?
They were ground truthing it.
Exactly. If the data said, everyone deploys on Fridays, and the whole room laughed and said, are you crazy? We never deploy on Fridays. The researchers knew they had a problem. They used the community to stress test the data in real time.
And the third point of the triangle.
External experts and literature review. This is the academic rigor part. They looked at other fields, sociology, psychology, management theory. They asked, does this pattern we are seeing in tech match what we know about human behavior in other high-stress, high-consequence environments?
Like aviation or emergency medicine.
Right. For example, they found that blameless postmortems, where you don't punish people for accidents, lead to safer software. Well, guess what?
Why?
Aviation has known that for decades.
Interesting.
If pilots are afraid to report near misses because they'll get fired, planes crash. If they feel safe reporting them, safety improves for everyone.
So when the software data matched the aviation data, they knew they were onto something real and fundamental.
Exactly. That triangulation confirms that the finding isn't just a fluke in their survey, it's a fundamental human truth that applies across domains.
Now, there's one technical term in the text that I want to clarify because it affects how we view the timeline of this research. The difference between cross-sectional and longitudinal.
Yes. This is a very common point of confusion, but it's really important. A longitudinal study follows the same specific human beings over time.
Like that movie Boyhood. You watch the same actor grow up over 12 years.
Right. It's a perfect analogy. So in a longitudinal study, I would interview, let's call him developer Dave, in 2014. Then I would have to find Dave again in 2015 and again in 2016 and measure how he specifically changed.
That sounds ideal. I mean, why didn't they do that?
Two big reasons. First, privacy. To track Dave for 4 years, I need to know who Dave is. I need his name, his email, his social security number, essentially, linked directly to all his answers.
Which completely violates the anonymity we just said was so important for building trust.
Exactly. If Dave knows I'm tracking him personally, he might stop being honest about his failures at work. He might start trying to look good for the study.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second reason?
Just pure logistics. The churn in the tech industry.
Laughs. Cave doesn't work there anymore.
Dave is at Google now. Next year, he's at a startup. The year after that, he's burned out and he's opening a coffee shop in Portland.
It's true. The average tenure in tech is what, like 2 years?
If that. So if you tried to track a specific cohort of 5,000 engineers, half of them would be gone or in completely different roles by year 2. Your sample would just disintegrate. It would fall apart.
So instead they used cross-sectional.
Right. Think of it like taking a school yearbook photo every year. It's not the same kids in the senior class photo every year. The faces change. But you can still see the trends over time.
Oh, look, the hairstyles are changing.
The jeans are getting tighter. More kids are wearing glasses. You're analyzing the state of the population at a moment in time, not the journey of any single individual through time.
So it allowed them to see these big industry-wide patterns, like the massive rise in cloud adoption and automation over 4 years, without needing to stock individual employees across the country.
Exactly. It was the right trade-off for this kind of research.
So we have built a pretty solid case here. We have the right target audience, the right kinds of questions, a clever sampling method, and rigorous fact-checking. The machine that built this data seems really solid.
It is. It's arguably one of the most rigorous data sets we have in the entire field of management science, not just tech.
And this is where the text takes a really interesting turn at the end. Having the data is not the same as fixing the problem.
Knowing is not doing. It's a classic gap.
The text pivots to the application of this science, and it acknowledges that changing an organization is complex and daunting, which I feel is the understatement of the century.
It is. You can show a CEO a chart that says high trust equals more money, but that doesn't tell them how to build trust on a Tuesday morning when the server is on fire and everyone is pointing fingers.
This is where they introduce two figures, Steve Bell and Karen Whitley Bell. Who are they in this context? What's their role?
They are pioneers of what's called lean IT. And what's interesting about their approach, as described here, is that it is method agnostic.
Meaning they don't care about the labels, like we were saying before.
Right. They don't care if you use Scrum or Kanban or Kata or strategy deployment. They aren't trying to sell you a specific religion or a framework. They are focused on the outcome. Use whatever tool works to solve the actual business problem.
And there's a case study mentioned here that I think really grounds this whole conversation. ING Netherlands.
Yes. This is crucial because we so often hear these success stories about startups. Oh, well, there were three guys in a garage. Of course they could change their culture. They didn't have one yet.
But ING, not a startup.
No, this is a global bank. The text mentions 52,000 employees. And get this, 9,000 engineers.
9,000 engineers. That's bigger than the population of most towns in America.
Exactly. Just imagine the inertia of that. 9,000 people writing code, thousands of managers, decades of legacy processes and political empires. Turning that ship is monumental.
The text highlights that just showing them the State of DevOps report isn't enough. You can't just email the PDF to 52,000 people and say, be better.
Right. The Bells argue that you have to move beyond just breaking down silos.
That's another one of those buzzwords we hear constantly, break down the silos.
It is, but what does it actually mean? The text talks about enterprise purpose. It means the transformation can't just be an IT thing. It can't be isolated.
Explain that. It's an IT thing.
Okay, imagine your IT department becomes super agile. They are awesome. They are deploying code 10 times a day. But your legal department still takes 6 weeks to approve a one-line change to the terms of service.
Okay.
And your marketing department is promising features that don't exist yet. And HR is still hiring people based on job descriptions from 1990.
You haven't actually made the business faster. You've just made the developers frustrated because now they're waiting on everyone else, but faster.
Exactly. You've optimized one cog in a broken machine, but the machine is still slow. The ING case study shows that true transformation requires a holistic end-to-end approach. It has to be aligned with the purpose of the enterprise, which is serving the customer, not just making IT efficient.
So the data from the survey gives us what it tells us that automation and trust in small batches work. But the application of that knowledge requires leadership. It requires management. It requires a completely different set of skills.
Precisely. The science gives you the map. It shows you where the treasure is buried, but you still have to drive the car. And you have to convince 52,000 other people to get in the car with you and agree on the destination.
I love that. It's humbling. The data is a weapon, but you have to know how to wield it.
And that is why we still have those arguments in the conference room that we started the show with. The data is there. The proof exists. But the human element, the fear, the inertia, the politics, that is the final variable that the survey can measure, but it can't fix.
So let's bring this all home for you, the listener. We've gone deep on methodology today. We've looked at the gears inside the clock. Why does this matter? Why should you care about snowball sampling and response bias?
Because critical thinking is a superpower. We are living in a world that is drowning in data. Every vendor, every consultant, every toolmaker has a chart that says their way is the best way.
And usually that chart is based on asking 3 of their best customers, hey, do you like us? Yes or yes?
Exactly. Or it's based on vanity metrics that sound good but don't actually predict anything useful. When you see a statistic now, I want you to pause. I want you to ask the questions we asked today.
Who did they ask? Did they just survey their own Twitter followers who already love them? Or did they cast a wide, diverse net?
And how did they ask? Did they ask about opinions? Do you like agile? Or did they ask about concrete behaviors? Do you deploy daily?
That really is the litmus test, isn't it?
It is. The credibility of this entire project comes from its transparency. They showed their work, they admitted their flaws, they told us about the unaware group they missed. That honesty is what makes the data so powerful and so useful.
I want to leave everyone with one final thought, something that has been stuck in my head since we discussed that missing cohort back in Section 1.
The unaware.
The dark matter. The researchers admitted that their study, as rigorous as it is, likely ignores the bottom 20% or 30% of the entire industry, the people who didn't even know what DevOps was, the people who couldn't even get a seat at the table to be measured.
The ones who aren't even in the conversation.
We know from the data that there is a massive performance gap between the high performers and the medium performers. It's huge.
Mm-hmm.
But if the bad performers, the true zeros, weren't even measured, just how deep is that hole?
It's an abyss. It has to be.
It suggests that the gap between the great and the truly oblivious is terrifyingly large. And if you are in an organization that isn't looking at this data, that isn't asking these kinds of questions, you might be in that abyss and not even know it.
You might be the dinosaur looking up at the meteor and just wondering what that bright light is in the sky.
So the real question for you, listening right now, is simple. If a researcher sent a survey to your team today, asking about the mechanics of your daily work, your lead time, your deployment frequency, your failure rate, would you be able to answer? Or would you be the data point that never was?
That is a question worth answering.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.